Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Justin Bibelan aka Organism 118 and welcome to this episode of Understanding Environmental Science. Okay, so we will now talk about the chapter 3 of this topic about and lesson about environmental science, which is all about the ecosystem. Okay, so how does the Earth's life support system work? Okay, so for this chapter, I will be discussing to you about the major components of the Earth's life support system and the cycling of nutrients, which is actually the life here on Earth is sustained by the flow of energy because of through the biosphere and the cycling of nutrients within the biosphere and of course the gravity. Okay, so let's move to the four major components of the Earth's life support system. So the Earth's life support system is primarily consists of the four main spherical systems, okay, that interact with one another, which is the atmosphere, okay, that describes the air, okay, the hydrosphere, which describes the water, the geosphere, which actually describes the rock, soil, and sediment, and the last one is the biosphere, which talks about the living organisms or the living things. Okay, so what is a the major components of the Earth's life support system? So we can view the with this figure, okay, the four major components of the Earth's life support system. Okay, so if we have our Earth, so the air system is what we call the atmosphere, and the blue one is the our water resources or our water system, which is actually the hydrosphere, and the geosphere will be talks about the core, the mantle, and the crust. Okay, and the biosphere is how the living things are actually interacting with all of these spheres, the geosphere, the atmosphere, and the hydrosphere. Okay, now let's move first to the topic about atmosphere. The atmosphere is actually a thin spherical envelope of gases surrounding the Earth's surface. Okay, its inner layer is the troposphere, which extends about 17 kilometers, that is actually 11 miles above sea level at the tropics, and about 7 kilometers or 4 miles above the Earth's north and south pole. Okay, so it contains the air that we breathe, which actually consists mostly of the 78% of that is actually nitrogen, and the 21% is oxygen. And the remaining 1% consists entirely of carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane. Okay? So the next layer is actually reaching from 17 to 50 kilometers or 11 to 31 miles, which is the stratosphere, okay? Above the Earth's surface, and its lower portion holds enough the ozone layer, which is our gas that filters the harmful ultraviolet rays that is actually coming from the sun. Okay, so the ozone layer or the ozone gas filter out the 95% of the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation. And where is the ozone layer located? It's actually on the stratosphere. Okay, so those are the things that are the main or the basic components of the atmosphere. Okay, now let's move to the hydrosphere. The hydrosphere is made up of all the water on or near the Earth's surface. Okay, and it is found as water vapor in the atmosphere. Okay, as a liquid water on the surface and underground, since we have underground water, especially here in Dumaguete, that is our water resource. Okay, that that uh, that the Dumaguete Water District supplies us with our water, the everyday life water, which is actually taken from the underground water. Okay, so and as ice or polar ice, which or icebergs or glaciers, and ice in frozen soil layers, which is what we call the permafrost. Okay, so all of this water components are actually made up the hydrosphere. Okay, so it could be a solid water, it could be a gas water, which is a water vapor that is actually gas. So if it talks about water, then it belongs to the hydrosphere. Okay, so liquid water, which is actually in the ocean, like in the surface, so that is the ocean, the river, or even on the underground. Okay, and we have the solid water, which is what we call the polar ice, icebergs, or glaciers, and also the permafrost that are actually formed whenever the layers of the soils which contains water vapors there are actually solidifies. Okay, so the oceans, which cover about 71% of the globe and containing 97% of the Earth's atmosphere, support about half of the world's species. Okay, so ocean is also important component of the hydrosphere. Okay, so that's it. Now let's go to the geosphere. Okay, the geosphere consists of the Earth's intensely hot core. So from the root word geo, that it means earth. Okay, so rocks or soil or sediments. Okay, so geosphere consists of the Earth's intensely hot core, which is actually the center of the Earth. Okay, a thick mantle. Okay, next to core is the mantle and composed mostly of rock, and after that is the outer layer of the earth, which is actually the crust. Okay, so the crust upper portion contains soil chemicals that organisms need in order to live, grow, reproduce, okay, as well as non-renewable fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, and minerals that we use. So it's very important that we can distinguish that where we are going to get our renewable resources, and that is actually on the upper portion of the crust. Okay, and of course in the crust that is where the living organisms live, grow, and reproduce, especially the animals and also the plants. Okay, so now let's move to the biosphere. So from the biosphere, from the root word bio, which means life. So basically, biosphere means that it consists of the parts of the atmosphere, geosphere, and hydrosphere where life is found. Okay, so in the atmosphere, whenever life is found, that is also belongs to the biosphere. Okay, in geosphere, if there is life found there, then that is also belongs to the biosphere. And if in the water or in the hydrosphere, if there are life forms there, then that belongs to the biosphere. Okay, so if the Earth were an apple, the biosphere would be no thicker than the apple skin. An important goal of environmental science is to understand the key interactions that occur within the layer of air, which is the atmosphere, the water, which is the hydrosphere, and the soil, which is the geosphere, and organisms, which is the biosphere, and how we interact with each other or within the biosphere. Okay, so how the biosphere interacts with all of these components, okay, on the Earth's life support system. Okay, now let's move to the factors, okay, or the three factors that sustain the Earth's life. Okay, so life on Earth depends on these interconnected factors. Number one is the one-way flow of high-quality energy from the sun. Okay, through living things in their feeding interactions into the environment as low-quality energy, okay, mostly heat that is dispersed into air or water at a low temperature and eventually to outer space as heat. Okay, this is the basis for the solar energy. Okay, the solar energy that is actually coming from the sun. Okay, that solar energy powers the Earth climate system in a shortwave radiation, and roughly half of the incoming solar radiation is absorbed by the Earth's surface, and some of it could be reflected back to the uh, atmosphere or back to the space, okay? And the solar radiation absorbed by the Earth's surface is converted into heat and emitted as a long wave radiation, okay? And some of those infrared radiation that escapes into space will escape into space, but most of it is absorbed by the greenhouse gases that is actually in the atmosphere, okay? And this interaction between the gases and the radiation warms the Earth's lower atmosphere and surface, okay? So, as solar energy interacts with the carbon dioxide and water vapor and other gases in the in the troposphere, then it warms the troposphere, and therefore this is what we call now the greenhouse effect. Okay, so we all knew that the carbon dioxide are the greenhouse gases. We have water vapor and methane also, and other gases that absorbs the radiation that is coming from emitted by the earth, okay? So, and it is actually reflected back to the earth, which actually hits the earth's atmosphere as well as the troposphere, okay? So without this natural process, the earth would be too cold to support most of the forms of life we find here today. Okay, so that's it. That is the first factor that sustain the earth's life, uh, okay, which is the one-way flow of high-quality energy from the sun or the solar energy. The second one is the cycling of nutrients. Okay, so when we talk about nutrients, these are actually atoms, ions, molecules, elements, and compounds which are actually needed for the survival of the living organism. Okay? So through parts of the biosphere, because the Earth does not get significant inputs of the matter from space, its essentially fixed supply of nutrients must be continually recycled to support life. Okay? In keeping with the chemical cycling. Okay? With in keeping with the chemical cycling. Okay, so that's it. So I already discussed about the chemical cycling or the cycling of nutrients when we go to the introduction on the environmental science. Okay, which is the chemical cycling is one of the principle of the sustainability. Okay, and we also discussed that this cycling also involves the what we call the interdependence of the living organisms within the ecosystem or on in the environment. Okay, so there is what we call the interdependence because uh, other living organisms depends on the other living organisms for their survival, and there is no waste or little waste are actually produced in the environment because all of these wastes are actually being converted into raw materials for other organisms, and it will be useful to for them to be for their survival, for them to live, flourish, reproduce, and grow. Okay, so that's it. And the last factor that sustains the Earth's life support system is actually the gravity. Okay, the gravity which allows the planet to hold onto its atmosphere and helps to enable the movement and cycling of nutrients through air, water, soil, and organisms. Okay, so the gravity allows movement and cycling of the nutrients, and without gravity there will never be no cycling of nutrients, and there will also be uh, there will never be an atmosphere or layers of atmosphere, and also some of the living organisms will be unable to move, reproduce, and grow. Okay, so gravity is also important on the factors that sustain the Earth's life support system. Okay, so we come up with the components of the ecosystem, but what is actually the major components of an ecosystem? Okay, so some organisms produce the nutrients they need. Others get the nutrients they need by consuming other organisms, okay? And some recycle nutrients back to producers by decomposing the wastes and remains of other organisms. So let's find it on what are the major components of an ecosystem. But before that, ecosystems have several important components that we are actually studying it in the branch of the biological science, which is what we call the ecology. Okay, so ecology is a branch of biological science that focuses on how organisms interact with one another with their non-living environment of matter and energy. Okay, so scientists classify matter into levels of organization, ranging from the most basic one, which is the smallest fundamentals of matter, or the smallest particle, okay, which is what we call the atoms, then down to the biggest one, which are the galaxies. Okay, so this and ecologists only study on the interactions within and among five of these levels. Okay, what are these five levels? We have the first one is the organisms. Okay, because there are actually levels of the uh, there are actually levels in studying ecology. Okay, we have your levels in matter. Okay, we have first one is the atoms, then we have the molecules, then we come up with the cells, and so on and so forth until you have the bigger picture, which is the galaxies. Okay, but on this topic, we will be only concerning with the five levels. Okay, the five levels of the ecologies that they studied with. Okay, first one is the organisms, followed by the populations, then communities and ecosystems, and the last one is the biosphere. Okay, which are actually illustrated on this figure. Okay, so we'll be talking about the organism. Okay, so this is what we call the levels of the uh, levels ranging from or in classifying matter. Okay, from atom we go to the biosphere, which is all the bigger picture now. Okay, from the smallest picture or the smallest particles of matter down to the biggest or the parts of the earth's air, water, and soil where life is found. Okay, so that's it. But we will be only concerning with the five levels: the organism, which is actually the individual living being; the population, which is the group of individuals; the community, which are actually the populations of different species living in a particular place; ecosystem, which is a community of different species interacting with one another with their non-living environment of matter and energy; and with the biosphere, which is parts of the earth's air, water, and soil where life is found. Okay, so the biosphere and its ecosystems are actually made up of what we call the biotic, which is the living organisms, and the abiotic components, which are actually the non-living organisms. Okay, so examples of non-living components: we have the water, air, nutrients, rocks, heat, and solar energy. Living components, this actually includes the plants, animals, the small living organisms like the bacteria, fungi. They're actually a part of the what we call the microbes, okay, or the uh, microbiologicals, okay, and all other organisms. So ecologists assigned so these are the figures that shows the biotic and the abiotic factors in the ecosystem. Okay, so always remember that the biotic factors also includes the decomposers, or which is primarily consists of bacteria and fungi. Okay,